Podcast, a platform created to entertain, educate, and evolve the modern-day deer hunter.
Sure, yeah, Tony Peterson, and I guess I don't even know where to start. I've been an outdoor writer for a long time now, and that was the primary gig for me, in my mid-20s to probably about 5 or 6 years ago, when people stopped reading magazines and stuff and started consuming content a different way. And so I kind of went from being just a traditional outdoor writer to creating all kinds of content between podcasts and articles and how-to videos and everything for a bunch of brands like Bowhunter and North American Whitetail and Gundog and Wildfowl. And as of last February, I'm a full-timer with the MeatEater crew, so everything that I create now is under the MeatEater umbrella, and it's largely focused on whitetails, but I do get to cover some dog stuff and some western hunting and turkeys and other things. So that's kind of the really abbreviated version of what I have going on.
Are you doing more traveling hunting now with MeatEater than you were prior, or is it about the same or less?
It's probably pretty similar. It's just for different reasons. For a long time I traveled to maybe an average of like 5 states a fall. But I was, just bow hunting public land on my own, or maybe bird hunting somewhere. And, it was all just to fuel the articles and my personal content. And now I probably travel the same amount, but most of it is tied to some kind of content that I'm creating for them.
Like going out and shooting a nice elk?
That was actually for me.
Oh, so, good for you. Nice. Did you have to tote a camera crew around or do any of that stuff, or were you what were you doing?
No. I this is going to sound like a real first world problem, so I don't want to sound like I'm griping too much, but when you know how it is when you're as passionate about whitetail hunting as we are, but then it becomes your job, it changes. It's inevitable that the enjoyment is different and your motivations are a little bit different, and so you got to find something that just fuels you. And so for me, whitetails are a lot of my whitetail hunting is my job, even though like taking my daughters and stuff is kind of like my traditional for me type of hunting. But I always try to have like one western hunt or something where it's just like me and a buddy, and I'm not there to get a product, like I just want to go. And it a lot of times it is a hunt in the mountains because I really value the limited time I get in the mountains. I look at this, I'm 42 now. I'm like, man, even if I really get after it, I maybe have like 15 elk hunts left, 20 elk hunts, overall, if I get really lucky. And so you're talking not that much time in the mountains before I'm probably not spending hardly any time in the mountains. And so that if I have one hunt I could take a year where I'm like, I just want to do this for the pure process and enjoyment of it. That was what that elk hunt was to me.
Nice, man. Yeah, I was talking to somebody about starting to put some points in. Well, we could talk. Maybe we'll talk afterwards a little bit. Oh man, I'm curious to ask you about like if we've been doing too good of a job promoting. Like I've heard a lot of rumors of people's spots getting real tight and a lot of pressure just because I've been talking to a few people about going out elk hunting, and that's like the number one thing that I keep getting back is like you're either going to pay a lot of money or be around a lot of people. Is that true?
No. And it's kind of driving me nuts that that's the accepted narrative out there. And listen, if you're going to go elk hunting, and you don't have a bunch of points or a bunch of money, you're going to go to one of a few states, most likely Colorado, maybe Idaho, maybe Montana, and you're going to be hunting public land with other people. But I've done all my elk hunts have been in Colorado, and all I've heard is how packed it is and how many people are there. And I've had those hunts where I've just been like, man, I saw 13 headlamps going out this morning. But even on those hunts, I've had opportunities to kill elk. I've never hunted over the counter public land elk without getting a chance, at least one good chance to kill
Yeah, I've heard
them.
there's a
And
lot of elk there in Colorado, right? I mean, I hear that repeated too. A lot of elk, a lot of people.
well, that's exactly it. And I look at, man, elk hunting to me, in the elk hunting that I do, I've never done the private land thing. I've never drawn a good unit. It's always been an over the counter public land hunt. And what it really reminds me of is bow hunting whitetails in the big woods. It's just a matter of figuring out where the concentration is
Sure.
and getting on them right now. And man, people complain about too many hunters out there, and I get it, but I have never found a spot in the mountains where you couldn't find a way to get away. And I know that maybe like that sounds cocky or something, but I just see people, it's so much like the whitetail world where they're like so patternable. They take the same trails, and they kind of like concentrate on the same meadows or
The
the same
the
nice
people? Are you talking about the people or the elk?
the people.
Yeah. Right.
And the elk go where the people don't.
Right.
And so, we have this idea in our minds, just like whitetail hunters, where it's like, oh, I want to kill that buck on a field edge. And it's like, yeah, great. But if you're on public land and it's week 3 of the season, he's not coming there.
Right.
So you got to go to him, right? Because he's like, I know where the people are, and I'm going to go where they're not.
Right.
And elk hunting is entirely that game. And so, when you look at concentrations around trailheads and sort of easier walking and, these beautiful meadows and aspen flats or whatever that look like what you think in your head should hold elk, everybody goes there. And everybody goes there with the idea they're going to bugle a bull in. And, the thing that I think is killing elk hunting right now is the mentality that if you just cover 14 miles a day, you'll run into them. And so people go out there, and I think they kind of don't get in tune with nature, and they go, I'm just going to guerrilla warfare these suckers until I run across one. And really, it is like, yeah, you got to cover some ground, but you got to pay attention because they're going to show you where they are. And, elk really show you where they're not, too, by not leaving any sign. And so I think that if you're a big woods whitetail hunter, and I don't care if you're in northern Michigan or you're down in Louisiana somewhere, you have a major advantage on public land elk because it's so similar.
Yeah, I could imagine that. You're gonna work around the pockets of animals. Yeah, when people talk about topography and where animals are should be and what they're gonna do, all of that changes when pressure is applied, and then the only thing they focus on, right, is being not around the pressure. And so, yeah, there's going to be pockets of them pushed into places, and it sounds like it's just a matter of having the time, right, picking it apart, and obviously maybe having seen that song and dance before and going with your gut, moving,
Yeah,
being mobile, right?
yeah, and I mean it's a little different. In the whitetail woods, we're kind of looking for, what's the food situation. But if you're a big woods hunter, you're dealing with a lot of browse and a lot of kind of here today,
Yeah.
gone tomorrow type of
Oh
mass or
God.
something.
Yeah.
And elk, you're like, yeah, I'd like to find where the elk are feeding. I'd like to find where they're watering. And water's real important to them and can be somewhat limited. So that can be kind of a trick you can use. But really, it's just like, where can they spend their time right now where they're not going to get harassed? Because that's where they're going to spend their daylight hours. They might walk a mile or two to go find food at night and get back there, go to water. But just like a public land whitetail, like the thing he's concerned with when the sun's out is not getting messed with by predators. And we are the predator, like so that's like so important. Like, where's the little sanctuary today? Or where's it going to be, by Saturday morning when a bunch of trucks have pulled into the trailhead and there's a bunch of new people hunting here, like where do they end up to not have to deal with that? And if you can start to think about that stuff and find places like that, you're so in the game.
Can I reference your old podcast platform? The catalog's still available, right?
I think so.
Yeah, you
I
have.
think so.
Well, you had Corey Jacobson on, and I've re-listened to that podcast like 3 or 4 times. That guy's a world of knowledge, and he's talking about elk. But when I'm listening to him, I'm thinking about deer often. Just
Yep.
because they have similar behaviors when you're hunting them on public land. And I ran into him this summer at Total Archery Challenge. He came to Michigan, and he was hanging out in the Prime booth. And I introduced myself to him, and I said, "Hey, I got to tell you, I listened to your conversation with Tony Peterson about what you said about keeping your pack light, staying close to your truck, moving around, and it just a switch went on in me that will never go off in regards to how I spend my time, and it made all the sense in the world, and I used that at the tail end of last year. It was towards the end maybe of the hunting season when it had to be in November, I guess it would have been when I had heard that. Anyways, it worked out for me, man. I had that mentality going into a couple situations, and I was successful last year. I killed 4 antlerless deer, 2 with archery equipment, 2 with gun, 2 on public, 2 on private, and one was actually tracking with a gun, which
Nice.
I had never done before. And no deer went farther than 60 yards that I shot. So felt good. And I got on a big deer last year and got an arrow in him, but didn't get him killed. Hit some brush. Arrow went rogue, stuck in his shoulder. He got away. But I don't know. I started to put some stuff together last year. But that conversation, people should go back and listen to that. And if you don't mind, I might put that in
Yeah.
the show notes for people to go listen to because that's such a good conversation. That guy's so smart.
Oh man. And the thing to keep in mind with a guy like Corey is he has, obviously he has a ton of just general elk hunting experience. So, like that, there's so much value there, but you also have to recognize that guy's like literally the best elk caller in the world. I mean, maybe, top 10 in the world or whatever, on any given day. And he has the confidence to do that style without without even thinking about it because he's gonna go strike one that he's gonna get to talk, and if he gets one to talk, that bull's in freaking trouble. Like he might not always kill it, but it's like such a testament to sort of like kind of finding your lane and just being like, I'm going to lean into what I'm good at and use it in a way where it works. Because I think, kind of like what you referenced with him is like we really kind of fall in love with the idea or like ideas around hunting, and we ride these dead programs all the time without really like full confidence in what we're doing. You know what I mean? Like, I guess I don't know if that makes sense, but when you talk to a guy like that or you listen to him,
Right.
there's full confidence there that's
Right.
built from experience,
Right.
and it works. And even if you'll never be a elk caller at his level, which none of us will be, the lesson is like, like find what you like and are good at and get really good at it and use that because it's like he showed with you or you showed with his example, it can transcend elk. Like his mentality and style isn't just an elk specific
No,
thing. It
finding
works in the deer woods.
well, it works. It applies all across for all. I mean, even to fishing. Like if they're not there, what are you do? Why are you?
Yep.
Go, find them, get on it. Deer are so fun to hunt that way. I mean, that's why I love big tracts of public land, is because I can just go and go and go. I would understand it's probably similar for you, right?
That's my favorite part about
Oh
big chunks of
God,
public land, man.
yeah.
Like you even when you're dealing with low population deer in the big woods, if you have 10 or 20 or 50 or 100,000 acres to work with, if you can't find deer, it's just on you. Like you're not looking enough. You're not keeping an eye out for the sign or covering enough ground or paying enough attention to your mapping software or whatever. Like
Yeah.
because they're out there, they're in there somewhere for you, and your job is just to find them and surprise them, and it's awesome.
Yeah. It could be, it oftentimes is for me that you wrong wrongfully invested your time because you're working with limited time. A lot of my deer hunting success when I was younger is because I was bull and china shop and I would just be there, like call into
Yep.
work, get out of school early, not go to class. I would just, and now obviously I'm not afforded that tactic. So yeah, if I don't spend my time wisely, which I've found now is a lot of scouting, just be moving and finding deer and getting right on them, not like maybe, I just it's like, man, you don't have the time for that. You got to go and find them and find a better spot and get on it. I'm a touch stressed out with what I have going on here right now. I've got my deer season and opening up here pretty quickly. I invested some time in some cameras, and I have not had a photo of a deer over 70 inches. And frankly, and we'll see what happens here. We're getting a 20-degree temperature drop tonight. Okay,
Yep.
so in the last couple days, I was like, are my cameras working? Like it's dead. I mean, they're dead. Like,
Yep.
and I'm just thinking like, oh, this is not great because not that is like my end all be all. I'm not like firmly invested that I have to be getting photos and have deer on camera to get on deer and be successful, but it certainly is encouraging that if a couple of the camera setups that you set up start hitting real good, that you're like, all right, I'm kind of building some momentum. I'm getting on
Yep.
deer. I'm seeing what I expected to see, maybe, and that is not my case right now. And a lot of it has to do with the couple spots the last couple years that I've done real well in have had acorns, and they do not this year, and the deer are not there
Are there acorns dropping somewhere else?
somewhere, but I haven't have been afforded the time. Maybe I
Yep.
shouldn't have spent 6 hours hanging three cameras. Maybe I should have just been pounding dirt finding acorns, right? That's what I'm talking about. Like, how
Yeah.
would you spend your time?
Man, I I feel like camera trail camera usage for me, at least personally, is like not that great of a time investment. And
Yeah.
I mean, so I hunted with one of my daughters in Wisconsin last weekend for the opener, and I had the same thing. I had a lot of deer for the area anyway, a lot of deer coming through, and then it died, and I mean died.
Yeah,
And
right.
I went into that like, man, I have no confidence. We sat 8 hours on Saturday, never saw a deer,
Ooh.
and then Sunday morning, a little spike buck came in, and she shot him standing like 8 feet in front of one of my cameras. I mean, like positioned perfectly in front of a camera. And I was like, man, we might have got that shot on, an image of that shot. That camera never picked him up. And it picked us up when we went out to look for arrow.
Huh.
And I've seen that happen a lot. And I'm
Yeah.
going, and I don't know, it was super humid. Maybe there were conditions that, conspired to make it not function very well. But I've had so many times where I've had deer I've watched walk by a camera and they didn't get them, where I'm just like, I don't know what's going on
Yeah.
anymore. Like I don't know what percentage of deer
Right.
cameras pick up,
Yeah.
but I'm kind of leaning toward like maybe 30%.
Well,
I
too,
mean,
the proximity, the angle and the range. I mean, you turn it 90
for
degrees on the tree and you're looking at a whole nother chunk of woods, right? So that's like,
yeah,
you almost need like four cameras on a tree if you're actually going to try to cover that.
it's so true. And I really think like I believe me, I still love cameras. I think they're cool, but I think it's going to serve me well to acknowledge that and go, okay, if these things are only picking up, let's say even half of them, half of the deer that walk by, if your cameras die and there's nothing going on, it's like, okay, yeah, the deer movement has slowed, but has it fully stopped here? I don't know. I doubt it. And then, like you said, if it picks up, you might only be seeing, half of what's going on there. And so I think like they're still super valuable, but I'm just like I'm trying to almost like compartmentalize my camera usage and be like it's a cool compliment that sometimes helps me, but I don't want it to ever hurt me.
Sure. Yep. Well, the time thing is for real because you don't get that back. So if that's
Sure.
what you spent your time doing, and it wasn't, and ultimately didn't help you kill a deer, well, it's hard for me to not look at that and say I probably should have just been pounding ground and finding acorns. And I realized I'm like, man, I got to get up. We're going to do a deer camp like the 6th through the 10th, and it's all basically relying on food sources.
Yep.
And so I got to get up there and find some food.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like the biggest task you have for that one.
Yeah, yeah. I did. I talked with some bear hunters. There was a bear season here this past weekend, so we talked with some bear hunters, and they said the same thing. A lot of the bears that they had around the last couple of years have vacated because there's no acorns. And he says, "Well, there's acorns somewhere because that's where those bears are."
Yep.
And so I thought, all right, I guess got to get out and put some rubber on the road and put some boot tracks down. And somebody tipped me off on some software that I might look into tomorrow that helps you find like specific areas of trees in the woods. So I'm kind of interested to see if that pans out and works and what its accuracy is. But it might help out to find red and white oaks. Expedite me just burning through the timber.
Yep. Well, you know what I wonder about that? I don't know if you've ever run into this situation, but I definitely have in like southeastern Minnesota where the white oaks are the main draw. It's different when you get into different parts of the country, but down there you have a nice deciduous forest with big old growth white oaks. And man, I've had individual trees that were just a tree like this week, you know, and finding that in like a big wood situation, it's like that's needle in the haystack stuff. Like
Right.
that's so hard to do. So anything you can get to help you is probably not a bad idea.
Yep, you're right. And if it works out in that capacity, it actually will be good because there's so many acorns the last couple of years that it was almost like, you know, I don't know. They don't have to be anywhere particularly. There's acorns everywhere.
Yep. Yep.
So I was told that the apple trees, and I was noticing as I was driving around out there, just in people's yards that had fruit bearing trees, that they were all loaded with apples.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I'm gonna try to obviously locate and see if I can find a scenario where I can set up on an apple tree would be like really, really ideal, especially I think for that time window. It would be have been dropping apples for a little bit, but still have a reasonable amount on there, I would think. So I would think that would just be the ticket.
Yeah, I can tell you at least some of the stuff I saw and some of the places I scouted in Wisconsin, the apple thing this year is legit.
Yeah,
Like,
right. Okay.
I mean, the soft mass program is real and it's going on right now. I mean, I think that's what soaked up a lot of the deer where I'm hunting because there's not a big oak influence there in that little area, and I think that what got us was some of the apple trees, and we've got the same front. The front that's coming to you is blowing through us right now, and it's hucking out there, and it's knocking apples down. And so there would probably be a hell of an opportunity tomorrow morning to get on an apple tree hunt here.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. After some wind, huh? Rattles a bunch loose, and then they're just going to be there, huh?
Oh, I love that. That's almost the only time I focus on like really specifically, soft or hard, is this, you get into a post frontal situation where those deer are going to probably be moving anyway, and you've had a real wind to come through or like a really, really severe downpour,
Yeah.
and those deer will be on those apples or some of those oak trees. in a major way. And it can be, that's like such a, you got to get lucky, right? Like you got to have a setup around them, and you got to have the time to go once it
Right.
blows through. But I mean, you can see the same thing in the right situation when the maple leaves fall after it freezes, or in the right time of the season,
Right.
where they just like they're on that now. And if you can hit it, it's so cool.
Right. As you're saying that, I'm imagining myself now climbing an apple tree and violently shaking it.
Yeah, I
might
guess I guess you could go that route
might not
too.
be the sneakiest tactic, huh?
Nope, nope.
Yeah. Well, hey, you mentioned well, before I move on to that, the camera thing. I'm just thinking about this, like, because I've invested some time in this year, is setting up some mock scrapes and running cameras over them. I kind of like that because traditionally I grew up a bait hunter, so I was kind of used to messing with something to bring deer in.
Yep.
And I feel like this tactic can be pretty lethal if it's done correctly and in the right spot. But right now, I'm not well, and obviously as part. It'll be interesting to see how the season progresses, right? Because that's kind of how, not kind of how, I have all four of my cameras set over big mock scrapes that I went through an ordeal to make and make them really good. And my cameras are elevated up, enough to still have a real good angle and see, but also to be up enough to really kind of be. And I just found the spots where the cameras don't draw attention to themselves.
Yep.
And we'll just see what happens. And then I'm just going to take, some of them are carded cameras and some of them are cellular cameras. And I'm going to process that data accordingly and make my decisions based on that. My hunting here close to home is pretty much done, man. I mean, the neighborhood where our family farm was is just being built up. The last true good bedding area has two houses going up in it right now. So, and my cameras out on that farm would acknowledge the fact that something dramatic has happened because there's no mature deer around, and there's not very many deer around in general. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna be doing some serious running and gunning here this fall to try to find deer.
That'll be an interesting experiment for you, because I do think like over scrapes is one like really badass way to run cameras and learn about deer.
Right.
Yeah, I'll be curious what your cameras throw that show you throughout the season on those mock scrapes,
Yeah.
because there could be, I suspect there'll be times when all four of them are blowing up,
Right.
and then there's going to be times where they're just dead.
Like right now.
Yeah, but maybe soon. I mean, it shouldn't be long, and there should be some deer paying attention to those.
Well, just a few weeks ago, I set one up, and I used some synthetic lure that I have never experimented around with before, but it has a lot of people have been hyping it up. So I thought, well, I'll try it, and like within a day or two, I had a deer. I had a picture of two deer, and I the one deer was mounting the other deer, but they looked to be both does. I could not see antlers on the deer that was mounting the other deer, and the other deer was kind of standing for it, like
Hmm.
right on top of the scrape. And so I was like, well, they're liking something here. Somebody's excited about something, so maybe this is
It, it it wasn't a button buck.
it. It didn't look like a button buck. I have
Oh,
seen year and a half old deer before that have, maybe it's an injury or just a genetics thing, but I actually shot a year and a half old buck up north one weekend. A group of does came in. I picked the biggest one, shot it, and then when I got to it, it was the biggest one because it was a buck, a year and a half old buck, but he just had nubs like a button.
yep.
And
I,
so I don't know.
yeah, maybe. I mean, I shot one like that in Wisconsin one time that had like 1 1 inch antler, you
Yeah,
know,
right.
but same kind of deal. I saw him coming in. I was like, oh, here comes a nice doe. Thumped him, and right when I found him, I was like, he smells, or this deer smells like a buck. And sure enough, so, huh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
don't know.
I would guess that that deer that was mounting the other one probably has a set of nuts, but maybe not.
Hey, nowadays doesn't matter, Tony. It could be a what we call a transgen deer.
I'm gonna leave you to that one so
Yeah.
you can get the hate mail.
Okay. Well, you get it. It's funny. I know our audience well. They got good senses of humor.
Yeah, they're okay with it.
Yeah, they can handle it for sure. I, regardless of what the exact situation was, I was like, well, that seems like something got somebody fired up or whatever. But yeah, the last couple days, the cameras have just been like, honestly, I'm looking at the thing. I'm like, are they all broken? Like all of them at the same time? How could that be? But then
Man,
some wind moves some leaves around, you get an empty photo, and you're like, all right, I guess the cameras are still there, you know. But yeah, we took. This is one of the things on my list I wanted to talk to you about. But we took our boys up to a deer camp here this past weekend, and of course we had like I think the high on Wednesday was 65, and we went up Friday, and from Thursday to Friday, the high went up to 86. So
uh,
21-degree temp rise wasn't ideal for game movement. I can tell you that that was not the case.
yeah, I mean that's what we dealt with this weekend for the opener over there too. I mean it was just brutal,
Yeah,
just not even enjoyable hunting weather.
yeah. I, I, I was I was confident that that last hour of daylight still we were going to capitalize on, feed pat. I figured those deer are going to stay bedded all day in a cool spot on the edge of a swamp or whatever to stay out of the heat. But that as soon as it cooled down, they would, and the sun started dropping down, that they'd come out and get on the best food source. And
Yeah.
that did happen on one occasion for one of our parties. Somehow he, with a scoped firearm, missed the deer at 50 yards with a gun that we sighted in the day before, and he was dotting 2-inch centers at 50 yards. So I don't know, but he didn't hit it, and so that sucked the last little bit of morale out of. Well, I shouldn't say that. We had the time of our lives, but we were hoping to get the boys on their first blood trail, and
Yeah.
the weather just didn't hit right, and we only really had like one evening. We all blew deer out of our spots going in the morning, and we shouldn't have done that. We should have just allowed the boys to sleep in the morning, get up, mess around camp, horse around, and then we should have just went and sat the last 2 hours of the evening. I think we would have been more successful, but we had short period of time and we wanted to get them out there and we were real eager. And in hindsight, I think we screwed up.
Yeah, it's a tough call, man. Traditional, conventional hunting wisdom, I should say, says don't hunt the mornings in the early season. But when I have hot weather, I tend to do pretty well in the mornings. And like you said, you might get that evening sit where they pour out kind of late, but I have a lot of times where it's like super late, and it's like right at the end of shooting light or something where you just don't have a chance to make something happen. And I'm kind of finding like my daughter killed her buck on in the morning an hour into it, and I'm kind of finding like if I can get a spot I can get into and not blow them out like you said, I'm having pretty good hunts on hot weather in September in the mornings. And maybe that's just a freaking anomaly. I don't know.
I
It's
can
it's purely anecdotal on my part, but it has me thinking.
I can understand that, and I'll have to add that obviously in our situation with we had four boys, 5, 6, 7, and 7.
Oh,
So we did pop up blinds on food sources, and we all bumped deer going in. If it
yeah, I
was
got you.
just a group of guys going up there specifically to kill deer, we one would have been in our stands and saddles, and two, we would have been right in a better spots. We had to pick spots. Basically, we didn't have time to do any kind of major operation. It was basically like, hey, here's a food source. Here's
Yeah.
somewhat of some cover to set this thing up in, so we don't look just like a sore thumb standing out in the middle of nowhere, and then clear enough paths to be able to get some shots. And then obviously we didn't. It's not. I knew that the patience was going to be an issue, so I didn't want to have to sit an hour before daybreak, and then have the
Yeah,
kid being like, by the time the sun comes up, burnt out. So we went in a little later as well, and we all pushed deer off of our spots. But I
yeah,
think if we hadn't maybe done that, I think those deer might have bedded right by, bedded. They probably would have bedded right within close proximity to that, and then if we could have snuck in there in the evening, maybe we would
yeah.
have.
I got you. It's man, that situation with taking kids, it's
Oh
fun,
god.
but it's tough.
Oh gosh,
It is tough.
dude. Yeah. So your daughter got her first buck. Your
Yep.
younger daughter.
Yeah, so they're twins.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Okay.
and last year, this one got a doe, and then the other one got a little forky and a doe. And so this daughter was like, "I'm killing a buck this year," and we just happened to, a typical kind of big woods situation. We saw one deer, but we killed him, and she made a perfect shot on him. It was like a 12-yard shot. It was awesome.
Nice.
He went maybe 50 yards and piled up, and he's just a clean little spiker, but she was pretty proud of herself. And it was, you try to set everything up so the shot's going to be as easy as possible, but you just never know how it's going to break. And so, when a 10-year-old makes like a perfect shot, it's a pretty sweet win.
Yeah, that's great, man. It was interesting. I was just thinking, like, it was my instinct to ask you what weapon or what means, archery or crossbow or gun, but then I realized that I didn't care at all.
Well, I can tell you it was a crossbow because
Okay.
they can't draw. They wouldn't be hunting yet if they had to use a vertical
How
bow.
old is she?
10.
That's legit.
Yeah, so Wisconsin has no minimum age, as of a couple years ago,
Right.
and and I kind of wrestled with that. Last year they killed 3 deer and it was awesome, and this year they're bigger, and they've been hunting turkey since they were 8. But with a deer, my primary concern with them hunting a deer is let's do everything we can to not get an ugly death.
Yeah, right.
Like
Oh, yeah. You're so
I,
right.
so it's like it's 20 yards and in. That's it.
Yup.
Like
Yup.
that's what we're taking, and we're in spots where you know they're gonna be right on top of you if we see them. That's part of the reason we don't hardly see any is because it's pretty tight. But if they come in, the odds are pretty good. If you have an encounter, you're gonna get a really high odds shot. And so it's a lot of boring sits for them, but it gets exciting real fast because if you do have an encounter, and I mean, it's like like you said with the kids, like you got to think about like where are you going to be, where are you going to set up. You're using blinds, you're not mobile, so you got to get in a high odd spot and cross your fingers, and it's a different kind of deal. But man, it's so sweet when you look up and see a deer coming in, or like you hear one snap a stick close, and you're like, it's about to get pretty wild in here. And
Right.
my thought is always,
Yeah.
I work with them because it is a crossbow and they're loud. Like that's kind of a new world to me. Like I never hunted with them, and I don't have that much interest in them. I had no interest in them until I had daughters that could hunt with one.
Sure.
And they're loud, they're fast, but they slow down quickly, and the deer are going to hear them. Like they're going to hear a crossbow go off. They're not going to get out of the way, but they're going to be moving by the
Right.
time that bolt gets to them. And so, it's kind of like all that little stuff you and I take for granted because we know you're like, okay, like, how do I ingrain in them, like, where to aim? And I want them, like, just like the top of the lower third. So, like, maybe take the top of the heart off kind of aiming because I know those deer are going to hear it and there's a higher likelihood they'll be on a little bit of red alert because, we're moving around and
Yeah.
whispering
Right.
and,
Right.
it's a different situation. And so you have all of those thoughts. And then, like, when the moment of truth comes, you're like, man, I hope she executes because I do not want her to spine this deer or, really whack it in the shoulder or something and then have this big question mark going on.
Right.
And so far, if you use a good tripod and those crossbows are so freaking accurate. Like we haven't had a bad one yet, and it makes me feel better, but it's always like top of mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do know because my wife approached me here just a few weeks ago and it's like, out of nowhere, she's like, "I want to bow hunt." Like, I don't know if she heard a podcast or what I don't know what happened because I've been telling her for years, like, "Oh, you'd probably like it. You'd probably like it." You kill enough deer. We don't really need two bow hunters in the house. I like shooting my bow. I'm good with that. And then one morning she came back from the gym. She's like, "I want to bow hunt." I'm like, all right, just settle down. And so she's shooting her bow like every day, right? And she's like, taking hunter safety, doing the whole thing, wants to get after it. And I was like, I think it would be wise for us to. You've got a lot to learn if you want to do this, and I think with it being the season coming up right now, it would be probably not smart for us to try to rush into this. I think it would be real wise for you to entertain the idea of killing a deer first with a gun
Yep.
because there is a much less high. If she messes up, I think she'll be done. Like,
Yep.
the thought of
Yep.
wounding an animal, I don't think she'll recover from that. So I need her to heart shoot it. And I think if I give her a small rifle, and have a scope on it, that yeah, much lower percentage that things go wrong, and let's work on the processing the emotions and being quiet and executing this, and then if you want to roll it into archery, let's do that because I know you can, but I am there's a lot to get somebody up in a tree for their first time and shoot an arrow at a deer with a bow is it's a feat, right? And
Yep.
yeah, I'm hearing everything that you're saying, man.
Yeah, and I honestly think if I were going to start anyone who I had that major concern about an ugly death or a loss, I would start them in ground blinds, just purely from the angle perspective.
Yeah,
Like
yep. Or
you're less likely to spine them from the ground, and there's like one less thing you have to think about, with the angle,
mhm.
and I'm sure you've killed deer from the ground. Like it's just, man, when you're used to hunting from a saddle or a stand, and then you get on the ground, you have one broadside or quartered away from the ground, it almost seems unfair. You're like, this is such an awesome shot to take. It's just great. And so, yeah, you got to do stuff like that. You got to consider that stuff because if it goes right, that goes a long ways toward keeping them in the game. But if it goes wrong and you think they're going to get out forever, you got to be really careful with that problem.
yeah, it'd just be a bad situation.
Yep.
Yeah, you don't want to deal with it with your daughter. I don't want to deal with it with my wife. So I'm trying to figure out, like I said, let's worry about executing a clean kill and then processing that emotion and see if we want to do it again versus like trying to go all in and do it the hardest way possible.
Yep. Yeah, that can come later.
Yeah, exactly. Plenty of time for that. So yeah, what you're saying is ringing right in my head. Yeah, so we're starting now. I think the boys. You were talking about the age limit, right? And I think every kid's going to be individually different. It's just going to come down to their personality, their level of responsibility, how serious they take it, right? I feel
Yep.
like some kids are more mature at 10 than some kids are at 14 or 16. Just a figure of the way that they're raised and their DNA and their personality. So like the age thing, I'm open to entertaining that as long as the parents are obviously being responsible and not putting the kids in a situation that they're not prepared for. But I don't think I see that. I feel like I see the latter. And
Yep.
I don't think my kid's ready in any capacity. He's 7, but I think maybe in a couple years that we do this a little bit. He might be he might be ready. I don't know. I'm fascinated to see how these boys were up. No, I mean, you thought that somebody had let 4 lab puppies out of a kennel that had been caged up for a day while people were at work. You know what I mean? They did not stop running around at camp and chasing each other and just being boys. Like it was awesome.
Yep. Well, that's a cool environment, man, for kids. And I think I didn't have the social aspect of that growing up. Like we never had a deer camp or that kind of tradition. But my dad was really good about, like, we scouted a lot, and like the process was important from from just looking, back then it was just glassing or going out looking for tracks or whatever, to the processing of deer, kind of really like instilled in me like this is all really cool. And it's all like a big part of it. It's not just go out and kill something. And I think any experience like that you have, like you take those boys out and they have that way before they're actually going to hunt, they're going to be so freaking keyed up to hunt when they finally can, or when you finally like green light them.
Right.
It's going to like, it's going to be amazing.
That's
That's, what I look at with my daughters, because we don't, I still don't have like really that tradition, right? Like I just don't. But even before they were, I was even considering taking them hunting. I'd bring them along and go put up a blind, or go, they go hang a camera with me or something. Then we go trout fish and go into town and get some pie or something, or like just make it cool.
right.
Like positive association around the whole thing, like
Right.
dog training, and just build up that anticipation. And eventually, when you can take them, it's so fun because they kind of have that baseline excitement built in, because they know this is special. Like this is a freaking cool thing that we get to do, and it's just, man, when you can finally start taking them and you can leave your weapon at home and just have them hunt, it is fun.
Yeah, the pie thing is I'm on with that. Like I've been on that for since fishing. We stop and we pick up some candy or some cookies that we normally we don't buy that stuff, right? So, but my aunt did that with us when we were growing up. Like when we would go fishing, she would let us get a bunch of junk food and pop and stuff. You know what I mean? And that was like, yeah, the whole thing. And so I see that association, and I've been doing that with my kid. We stop and get a honey bun, or I let him pick something out.
Yep.
Some treats that go along with it, and then we did that at camp too. We brought a bunch of Pop Tarts and Oreo, this stuff that we don't keep in the house. You know what I mean? And the boys eat a
Yep.
sleeve of Oreos, just sit down. They're just wild animals, but we cut them loose, and the campfire and the cooking over the fire, they thought that was cool.
Yeah. Dude, I think, I mean, this is gonna sound stupid, but I was at the gym earlier today and I was talking to a woman that I've coached basketball with, who has a daughter the same age as our daughter. So we've all coached together at one point or another. And we just got to talking about, because I asked her if her daughter was going to try for this traveling league that my girls just tried out for. And she's like, no, she's super into dance and she's doing that whole thing. And we just got on the topic of like, these are 10-year-olds and they're already trying out for sports, because if they don't start on these traveling leagues now, they'll never play in high school. And it's like, that's like a crazy amount of pressure to put on fifth graders already. And you can see it, like you can see them stressing out about it. And I look at that and I go, man, the more of this stupid stuff I allow in their life, the more I have to get them into the woods and just let them relax and have some fun and get away from that other part. Because, as much as we're making like life about our kids right now in society, and they like, we'll give up every weekend so you can play traveling sports. Like, I don't think we're doing them a whole lot of favors that way
Dude,
in some capacities. Like I love the value of team sports, and
right.
I get that, but I look at the way it's structured now, and we're kind of vicariously living through them, and I go, man, the antidote to the bad side of that lifestyle, which is super common now, is to go up to deer camp and eat those Oreos and try to shoot a doe in a ground blind and laugh and whatever, and like have some fun in a way that's just different than that, because that lifestyle is, I don't know, man. Like I think our kids are going to need some green space and to see some squirrels and stuff.
You're you're so spot on. I am so I've been very irritated lately with what I have seen happen with youth sports. When I grew up, it was very affordable for anybody to play sports, and a community. Everybody kind of grew up playing on the same teams, and some kids were better than others. And then eventually, you got to a point where in high school, where people would start being on, separating themselves wildly, right? Like there's going to be varsity, there's going to be JV, there's going to
Yep.
be people that play travel in the off season. And then, you figure out who's going to be real serious about it. But man, they have kids now 5, 6 years old that everybody's bailing out of the local community scenes for. I'm talking particularly with soccer right now because that's like a popular thing.
Yep.
And I almost feel like it's like keeping up with the Joneses, right? Is like, oh,
Yep.
they pay $250 a month for little Sally to play soccer, and we're not doing that. So are we doing her? And I understand that too, also, and that's why I'm frustrated with this, is because if your kid does want to compete in high school at that level, those kids that have played all those club teams are going to be substantially better just by proxy of giving up every weekend, basically, of being a kid
Yep.
to go do. And now you're not going on vacations with your family. Your whole thing is structured around being there and doing that. And it's too much, too young, in my opinion.
Yep. It, it is. And honestly, I, I get why people value it. I get the arguments for why it's important to work hard and challenge yourself and do these team sports and all of that. But 99.9% of these kids have no future in this. Like, this ends at most likely when they graduate high school.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, then what?
Exactly.
Like, and you can take, I remember, when I was in high school, I was pretty good at baseball when I was younger. Like, but when I discovered, like, really got into fishing, I was like, I don't want to, like, I don't want to play baseball. I want to go fishing. And I remember, like, getting chewed out by coaches and stuff, and just being like, and maybe it was a bad decision, I don't know, but just being like, is it wrong for me to want to lean into this thing when everybody's pressuring me to do this other thing? And then, you know how it is. You get out of school for a few years and you're like, well, I'm still fishing like a fiend, and the Minnesota Twins aren't calling me up to try out. Like, this is something that stuck with me. And I look at a lot of this stuff and I go, man, we should probably give our kids a chance for some long game, hobbies or pursuits or passions or whatever, that are going to be there for them when this stuff dries up, which is inevitably going to happen.
Yeah. I have my son in boxing right now, and we go 1 day a week, and it is so nice. Um, and some days, honestly, I get a little irritated because he doesn't take it seriously, and I pay quite a bit of money. But then I remember, I'm like, he's 7. He didn't
Yep.
ask to do this. I'm making him do this. He can goof off a little bit if within reason, right? And his coach is really good too. He like kind of knows how to channel it. Like, yeah, he's just a kid being a kid. He, if I can keep his attention for 15 minutes, we really did something special. You know what I
Yep.
mean? And so I was like, yeah, but so it's good, but the the spending all entire weekend at a venue and then 2-3 days of practice a week, it's just like, yeah, when does it, and then the kids going to school, when do they have time to go? And it's so like, man, just the 2 days that we took the kids up north this weekend, like, they will never forget that, and there's things, that little life lessons within all of that is just going to build them into the men or the people that they're going to be in the future. You know what I mean? And
Yep.
yeah, man, you shouldn't have brought up the sports thing. Damn you, Tony. You got
I,
me all
well,
fired up.
I've been all fired up about it too. And then when I talked to Lindsay today at the gym, I got all fired up again because,
Yeah.
but it is what you deal with as a parent, and you just try to find some equilibrium in that stuff, and be honest with what's best for your kids.
Yeah, I want to add this in too, because this is one of the things that makes me the most frustrated, is that some households are not going to have the financial means for those kids to play those sports, and it's destroying all the programs that existed in the communities where everybody got to, everybody could afford to play, right? It was kind of structured that way. And those programs are really struggling because all these club things. And I like I said, I know I feel a sense of guilt is like, yeah, if they're doing this, I should probably be doing this too because I want my kid to be like, I want him to be playing against the best competition. I want
Yep.
him to grow and be good, but there's like no middle ground. It's I just feel bad for the households and the kids that may not have the financial ability to play sports in the future when some of these community programs dry up.
Yep. Oh, it's crazy. And I just wrote about this for a foundation script that I'm going to record here soon. One thing on that note, maybe to circle back to hunting a little bit, that really hit me hard this year, that I just kind of I think it's something we sort of acknowledge but really don't acknowledge, is when I was driving out to Colorado to elk hunt, which, keep in mind, you're driving out there on a $700 tag, and for me that's 1,100 miles, one way. Like, that's a even a do-it-yourself public land hunt. You're in it for, probably, when you factor in gear and everything, at least $1,500. Maybe at the bare minimum, maybe more with gas prices higher. And I was thinking about it, and I'm like, man, this is a lot of money to spend for this experience. And then I'm like, you're on, I-80 heading west, I guess it is, and I'm seeing elk hunting rigs all over. Everybody's heading out, and it's like everybody's got a side by side on a trailer, or these RVs, or campers. And I was just looking at this, and I've kind of always had this hope that we wouldn't, like, hunting wouldn't become a rich man's sport. And I'm like, you idiot! Like, it already is. Like, for a lot of this stuff, there's so much money being spent on it already, that it's like, it's almost like hard to grasp. If you're like just used to hunting whitetails close to home, you might be kind of insulated from it. But that little drive on that interstate going out to Colorado, it just hit me. Like, everybody I saw had so much money invested just in their trucks and their toys.
Right, I
And it's
see
like,
that.
you know what I mean? It's like, that money's not going away. That money's gonna. People have money. A lot of people have money, and they are gonna use that to have an advantage in hunting any way they can. And it just made me realize, like, the leasing game, the outfitter tag game, or the landowner tag game, I guess I should say, all of this stuff, it's only going to get worse. Like, there's only going to be a bigger divide there, because there is serious money being spent in this stuff.
Yeah, I understand that. Um, Yeah, very much. I'll move off the sports. That I just want to say one thing just to clarify that if that's what you and your family and your kids do, like, there's kids that just absolutely are into it and love it, and you guys are too. That's awesome. Good for you. Like, that's awesome. I'm glad that those things are there to exist to, I guess, to facilitate that. But if you're feeling like you're being pressured into doing that, that I also am there, like, and I see you're not being unreasonable in any capacity. I think there's some pressure there to have that be the case.
Dude, I think it would be safe to say that all of us who are navigating this as parents have no idea what the hell we're doing.
Oh yeah, I definitely got to preface that by saying, yeah, like, I'm a bit of an extremist also, right? When it comes to, like, community issues, like, I believe in dude, I've never bought a single thing off Amazon still to this day because I'm like, I like I mean, I don't want to see a small business not get my dollar because I'm spending it on Amazon. And I'm finding out when I'm around groups of people that I am not common. Everybody's talking and showing about what they got on Amazon and how cheap they got it and how fast they got it. And I'm just sitting there going, oh my God, I want to throw up right now.
Yeah, well, this is fodder for a totally different topic, but we're going to reap what we sowed from buying, you know, billions and billions of dollars of cheap junk from China through these platforms for a long time. Like, that's coming to a head.
Yeah, you're not wrong at all, man. Have you paid attention to what the Cameron Haynes and those guys are doing, launching that Made in America brand?
Somewhat. The brand that he's working with Jocko.
Yeah, that's right. It's called Origin, out of
Yep.
Maine. I'm really I'm watching those guys. I'm real curious to see if I mean, like you were talking about at the beginning of this with Ranella having a connection with Rogan, that like things are going to go, right? And so
Yep.
obviously Jocko's a monster, and then Rogan's into hunting, and they got all, the Black Rifle Coffee guys. And I mean, like, I feel like that thing has the potential to have a little bit of a cultural shift about how people maybe spend their money in the space. I don't know. If those guys can't do it, then I don't think it can be done.
It's an interesting experiment, and I hope it works. I mean, I really, really hope they pull it off. Even, I mean, they're in direct competition with us, and I hope they pull it off. And I think, I think the whole pandemic situation, it really taught us a lesson. I don't know if we learned it, but we need manufacturing here, and
You're
we need to own more of this, the process of our own medications and our own clothing and our own widgets and our own car parts and everything. And because at some point we are going to be held hostage over this stuff if we can't get it, and we don't want to get there.
don't want to get there, right? And that's what direction that's trending in. I know I've been concerned for a while about where all of our money's going collectively, and scale that down to you know, the hunting industry, particularly. If we're just exporting our cash out, it's like I don't know. It's a lot better if you keep it close to you and kind of circle it around, and exporting it all overseas is like, yeah. I mean, just like the writing's on the wall for something really bad to happen if we don't have a little bit of a cultural spending shift and support like our communities and our neighbors and invest in the people around us. We're going to be in a bad place. I mean, you can see it. It's happening.
Yep. Yep. I agree with you 100%, man.
Well, that got a little heavy. My bad.
Yeah, you want to talk about deer some more?
Yeah, my bad, dude. Well, and you've said this to me too sometimes, is like, hey, we don't always have to like talk about deer. There's other important things that need to be conversed about, right? We got platforms and there's things going on that need to be mentioned. So I'm always appreciative when I can go off the rails a little bit and people are willing to listen.
I think that is the maybe the secret sauce to podcasts. And then one of the best things that happened to the hunting industry is finally having the chance to not just talk about how to kill a deer.
Yeah,
I
dude.
mean, I can tell you what, dude, I've created, and I don't want to sound like a prick here, but I've probably created as much whitetail hunting content as anyone in the world ever has between all the writing and the podcast and everything. I got to be in like at least the top 10, right? And probably the most correspondence I've ever gotten out of anything I've ever written or filmed or recorded was a podcast I did on my sobriety. And it had very little to do with deer hunting.
Dude, it's funny that you brought that up because I wasn't going to bring it up, but I said if Tony brings this up, I'm going to talk to him a little bit about it because I've heard you mention it a couple times, so it's obviously been an impactful thing for you. I went August without drinking. It's like the first time I went an extended period without drinking in probably like whatever 20 plus years. You know what I mean? And
Yep.
it's just become habitual, right? So I was like, you know what, I can take a break. And my wife kind of challenged me, you know what I mean? So I was like, I'll show you. Uh, so I learned some stuff over that course of that time, and actually, I think I'm going to operate in a different capacity moving forward. But you chose a different path than I did, and I think that's maybe just us wanting different things or our personalities being different. But for you, it was like either all or nothing, huh? You just gave up drinking, right? And I know you've said it's increased your quality of life.
Oh, it was the best decision I've ever made.
So
But,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say, yeah. I mean, like the reason this is a weird thing for me because I'm actually like a relatively private person, but I don't even remember how it started. But I talked about quitting drinking, and people started reaching out, and I had people in the industry reach out. I had random listeners or whatever. I think it was a podcast, but it kind of made me realize I'm like, man, you should probably this hit people. Like you should probably keep talking about this. And so I bring it up fairly often. I'm pretty comfortable with it now, but it really kind of opened my eyes. Like there were a lot of people out there that wanted to hear that or needed to hear that or whatever. And so it was like, well, shit, you got to you should keep talking about this. And then once you talk about it for a while and you tell everybody, it's like, well, I don't know, like it's easy to be sort of ashamed of it at one point, and then you just get over it. You're like, whatever. Like, I'm just wired this way. Like, if you know, one drink, like I'm not that person. Like, if I start, it's as many as I can get. Like, that's just
You're
there's
chasing it.
there's no way around it for me. And like my wife, she can go for weeks without drinking, and she can have two, and she's like, I'm good. And I'm like, man, that sounds nice, because that is not what I got
So
going
you're
on.
just wired to chase it, right? I mean,
Oh,
because I see that behavior with a lot of people is like keep drinking, like they're chasing something.
well, for me, for sure. But I'm like an impulse control guy. Like, I go deep on stuff, and it can be a good thing or it can be a bad thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think the whole reason I'm still alive is nobody handed me heroin when I was 20. Like,
Yeah,
I
right.
mean, honestly, and with drinking, it's a bad thing to be wired with me, like I am with hunting, being obsessed with hunting or fishing or something. I mean, you can argue that there's bad aspects if you do it too much and you're ignoring your personal life, but generally, for me, that's served me really well. Like being kind of obsessive about killing deer has been pretty good for me. And I'm at a different place with it now. I can pump the brakes and whatever a little better, but that's just kind of me. Like, I'm just sort of that way. When I started working out, and like started running, I'm like, well, if I did 500 miles this year, why don't I do 1,000 miles next year? And I can't let myself not hit that goal. And so that's just sort of what I have going on in the chemistry in my brain. And you just have to be aware of some of that stuff. And if you can channel it into something good, that's freaking sweet. But if you let that get into something that's going to take you down, it's it gets bad.
Yeah. Um. Yeah, my wife a few months ago was like, take a break from drinking, and she's like really legitimately like took a long break, and I was like, all right, well, it's kind of a little bit lame. Like we go out to dinner usually together, or we go have some wine or whatever, and I'm like, oh, it's kind of lame to sit here and drink, and you're not. And I was like trying to figure out too, because I was like, you don't sound great. Like say like, hey, have it. I felt like I was putting pressure on her, and she's like trying to do something different, and
Yep.
the whole situation made me uncomfortable, uh, because I was just used to how things were,
Yep.
and so then, maybe a month or two went by, and then we went out to dinner one night, and she ordered a glass of wine. Just caught me off guard. And she's like, yeah, I listened to Ted Nugent, Joe Rogan yesterday, and he doesn't drink, but he says every now and then he has a glass of wine, and he's pretty successful. So I think I'll just have a glass of wine every now and then, and I'm like, all right, cool, whatever, however you want to do it, But it was kind of a
Yep.
shift and a change, and then I kind of lost my drinking buddy here around the house and going out to dinner and things. And so a couple months went by, and a big part of it was right. I'm trying to get like in really good shape, so I'm working out quite a bit and this and that. But I just decided the month of August was like not a month where I really cared too much about like drinking, and I had a lot to do. So I was just
Uh-huh.
like, I'm gonna take a little bit of a break, and I was very disappointed, Tony, that I did not. I lost 2 pounds, dude. Everybody's like, "Oh, you quit drinking, you're gonna lose a bunch of weight around your belly and this and that," and I'm like, "Yeah, it didn't work out for me." Uh, I found that out, and I think part of that is because when I do drink, I do one or two or three drinks maybe, and it's like vodka and soda water, and I'm putting fresh fruit in it and a bunch of ice. Like, I'm never trying to get smashed. I like to have a couple drinks and chill out and relax. And I found out also that I just like to have something to drink. Like, it doesn't
Yep.
necessarily have to be a beer, but I am just programmed for whatever reason to have some. I don't smoke, I don't chew, none of that. But
Yep.
dude, I like to have. I've been drinking these Lacroix. It's just like soda water. My wife bought some non-alcoholic like craft beers, and actually a couple of them are decent. With like a burger and fries, it's like it's something different. They're actually, they're not bad at all.
Yep.
and coffee. I've definitely increased my caffeine intake. But at the end of the month, I had a drink. Oh well, I lie. We ended up having a wedding in the middle of it, and we both said, "Hey, we haven't been to a wedding without our kids in like 20 years." And we're going to a wedding literally right down the road. We don't have to drive. Let's have a couple drinks. We were both like, yeah, do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. Little cheat day here, right? So we did that. But then at the end of the month, I had a couple, and I was just like, when I went into it, there was a couple things that like I was like, oh man, mowing the lawn sucks a lot more not drinking. Like, found a couple things that like I despised doing for a short period of time because I was just used to like we're
Yep.
talking about with the kids with the candy and the Oreos, it was like, oh, you got to go mow the lawn and that sucks. But a cold beer doesn't. So here we go.
Yep.
Uh, but yesterday I mowed the lawn and I didn't even think about having a beer. Like,
Yep.
yeah, it's
Well,
just
what you're talking about right there is the big fear a lot of people have, right? Where I'm going to end up in that social situation where everybody is and I'm not, or we go up north to the lake fishing and what am I going to do? Because I'm not going to be drinking, and people really worry about that stuff. And I get it. I did the same thing,
mm-hmm.
and it really isn't. Let me put it this way: if you need to quit, everything will be better. Like you'll realize the crutch that was in your life in those situations and how you don't need it.
Right.
Like like you didn't need it. You used it, but you didn't need it. And you find, like, I found one of the things I was so worried about when I quit was going to the hunting shack for like a rabbit hunt in February when my buddies are there and we're playing poker. And I was like, oh, it's going to suck so much being the only guy who's not drinking, or going up to our lake place and, it's a party every night. And what I realized was, like, man, I love not being hammered, and I love not waking up hungover, and I love the idea that I'm there and I'm watching these people, and like the people who are just like I used to be, and I'm going to get up at 4:30 tomorrow and I'm going to go catch smallies on topwater, and they're not. Like, you just find good things about it, like it's just. But you realize, like, what you're talking about there with the mowing the lawn and the beer. If you drink to a certain level, you realize how you structure your whole life around it. And it's like, if you need to quit and you do, you'll feel like you won the lottery because you're going to have a lot more money than you think you were spending on booze. And B, you just feel free. Like, you're not chained to that thought process anymore of, like, I have to have it here or I'm going to have it here. And so, how much can I have to drive, or how can I get a ride, or we're going to take an Uber here or something. Like, it's a weird thing, but you really kind of feel like you free yourself.
Yeah, the money thing was definitely a factor. Not terrible for me because I've been conscious about that for a while, so I'm kind of smart about how I buy and what I buy, and just the sheer volume that I consume is pretty minimal. So, I'm not going to the store every day and or every week and buying a 12 pack or buying a bottle of this. But yeah, I don't know. I kind of wanted to bring it up because I know, well, I just kind of went through. It was just interesting on the other side of it to look like, what, I maybe had some bad habits that got a little bit out of control and were negatively impacting me, and it's amazing the amount of self-justification in the spot that you can give yourself to be like, nah, that's not happening. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, dude. I mean, I think, and this applies to hunting too. I know this podcast has gone way off the rails, but the lies that we tell ourselves, especially dudes, like, we all think we're tough and stud muffins, and we can bench what we benched in high school and all this stuff. Like, the lies we tell ourselves that we believe are the worst ones, because it's so much better to face who you really are and how you can actually get better and be honest about it
Yeah.
than just live in that fantasy world, man.
Yeah. Dude, you're not wrong. You're not wrong in any capacity. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe somebody listens to this and it helps them out. But I know that I did recognize on the other side of it. I was like, yeah, you don't need to come home every day and have a drink or have two drinks with dinner every day. Um, I'm just a little more conscious of it and backed off a little bit, and I've been more productive, maybe generally more motivated, found other things to do with my time, and it's a product of where my life is right now too. Young kids. I mean, dude, I don't have the thought of having downtime because I drank too much is that's history. Like that, I can't have that. I can't have downtime. I have to be. I'm already struggling to be productive enough week in, week out. Like I can't afford to have a day down or hours down because I don't feel good.
Yep. Yep. It's a good call, buddy.
All right, we'll move off of it. Thank you. Sorry, obviously I put you on the spot there, but
It's all right,
I
man.
said if you brought it up that I was going to get into it, and you brought it up, so it's on you.
I'll take full responsibility.
Okay, we'll get winding up here pretty quick, but there's a couple last things that I want to go through. You started at the beginning of it about talking about working at MeatEater because things have gone away from print and the media sources have changed. I don't know if it's just me being the fact that I grew up on the other forms of media, the magazines and the videos and things, but I feel like they were better because the general public didn't get their hands on it and it was just more catered to our I don't know. Am I are
No, no,
you
no. Keep going. You're. It's like you've been reading my diary, buddy. Keep going.
yeah, like social media and YouTube is not where hunting belongs in any capacity and like books and magazines and I'm going to throw podcasts in there because they're long format educational conversations and people just typically aren't going to click on something unless they're super interested in it, right? But and DVDs, right? Like I just feel like that was such a great time and era and I don't think it's coming back. I think we've moved away from it and now I'm watching these big platforms where everybody's putting all their content and they're making money and now they're getting dinged telling, "Hey, you can't do this. Hey, you can't do that." And it's like, "Man, everybody's putting us in this position to have another set and group of people telling us what to do." And
Yep.
we were doing it and for producers, like I'll use a guy like Jared Shuffler, who's done just because he's historically done DVDs. I mean, that was his bread and butter. That's how he made his money. The profit margins for somebody that makes like an album or a DVD was higher for them, the artist or producer, than it is just digital download. And all those big tech platforms are getting a huge percentage of our money. It's being exported out of the hunting industry because of convenience.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. Where do you want to start?
Like I said, I clarified earlier that I'm an extremist, right?
Yep.
That's probably a good place to start.
So let's start with the money thing, because this is something that's kind of driving me crazy. Like if you watch like or if you pay attention to like rock slide forum, like hunting forums,
Yes.
or bow site or something, it's a there's a constant narrative that everybody in the industry is hunting for social media and they're all making money off of social media. And I'm just like, you guys don't understand really at all what's going on. Like most people aren't getting paid at all for social media.
Right.
Most people believe right now they get into the industry and the way to get rich is by having a big social media following, but it's totally smoke and mirrors. Like
Mm-hmm.
you have to have a good product that people will either pay for or somebody will pay to advertise on. That's it.
Right.
Like you're not getting paid off of clicks. Like if you have a big enough platform and it's connected to some kind of e-commerce or something, you can sell through it
Right.
through the awareness,
Right.
but it's not like they're giving social media way too much credit. And honestly kind of on our side we are too. And that's not where the money is. Like it's a component of what we do, but the what I see like the general hunter thinks about it, they have it pretty wrong in general.
Does it? Do you sit around a little bit? So, I mean, obviously, we're not going to sit around and dwell, but I mean, the magazines and the videos and the artwork on them and the right. I mean, oh, so great. Like I love that stuff so much. And to go on YouTube and click on a video is so soulless. It just drives me crazy.
I I think the big difference is the quantity. I
Yes.
think when you subscribe to Bowhunter magazine in 2000, you got 9 issues a year, or 10 if you count the gear issue, right? So basically once every 5 weeks or whatever, however the production schedule worked out, you got a new magazine in your mailbox, and it had 5 features that were written pretty well and edited pretty well and supported by good photography and a bunch of columns, and you kind of knew what you were getting, and it was vetted, and it went through a bunch of
Hmm.
pretty skilled hands.
Right.
So the product was pretty consistent, and it was like it was enjoyable. You didn't have tons of other platforms competing for your attention. And we've gone, or you go buy the DVD or whatever, like that's kind of what you're doing now, because it's so easy to create content and there's so much competition, and we're in a space where we're spending hours and hours a day on a device that can feed it to us. The demand is insatiable. I mean, you could do, you know MeatEater could produce 1,000 times what it's producing right now, and people would consume it, which is bananas, right?
Hmm.
And so when you see that, it's like it's not special anymore. Like it's not that special to go to YouTube and put in big buck killed on public land.
Right.
Like, I mean, how many hundreds of videos are going to pop up? And so I think we're kind of like in a fatigue state with this stuff, where it's like none of it feels that special anymore, because most of it's not. And when it's not, then people, they're maybe not trying as hard to create really compelling stuff or tell a really compelling story. Why would you put in a bunch of time, like some gonzo journalism, to a really really interesting piece when you're competing with 3 ways to kill a buck in the cattails, 3 ways to grunt in a buck in October? Like, if those are going to get the clicks, which they do, then it's like there's less incentive to create the stuff that probably you and I would enjoy the most. And I hope that we just I hope the audience, or there's enough audience members out there that are calling for that, where we sort of course correct on this stuff, and we get back to going, you know what? It doesn't have to be 5,000 articles this year. We should maybe do 150, but really give them some love, or instead of a 3-minute how-to video on YouTube where a bunch of dipshits are going to comment on it because they hate the way your hat looks or something. Like, maybe we're going to do a film that's 45 minutes or an hour long, that tells a story. And
Right.
yeah, you're not going to get maybe the 20-year-old crowd the same way you'd get the 50-year-old crowd or something like that, but you might get a valuable audience that appreciates it, and we'll tolerate the ads, or we'll go support you and buy a shirt or something, because they're like, that speaks to me. And that's kind of always the hope, right? Is like there's always going to be a market for the get your eyeballs on it, throw away type of content, because we're not getting away from that. But what I hope is that eventually, and I think podcasts are a great, like, I think the best evidence that this is possible is people will listen to a 2-hour podcast. Like, people will give you that time if you give them something worth listening to. And so I look at that and go, there's a glimmer of hope that the kind of content you're talking about still has a lane somewhere, and there has to be somebody out there with the cojones to make it, and it could still work, and there could still be something for everyone.
Yeah, and the cream does still rise to the top usually if people find better content. I mean, maybe that's my personality too, right? I can only speak for myself, but as I get older, I much more value quality over quantity, and I see with our way our society operates, we're very quantity driven. Like, how much can I get for how little? And
Yep.
I'm sitting here going, nah, like, what's the best thing that I can get? Because I'm just going to do it once
Yep.
or not as often. It even goes back to the drinking thing, right? Like, in the money. I'd rather buy a $10 real nice drink at a bar than go somewhere cheap where I can get a bucket of beer for. Do you know what I'm saying? And I carry that through. I'm thinking about that with the food that we buy and everything else. Like I see these people wheeling around grocery carts. I'm like, holy fuck! You couldn't get one more thing. You couldn't get one more thing in that cart. They got packs of soda hanging off the thing like
Yep.
crazy, and we got half a cart full, but we got like the highest. We got the best groceries, most nutrient dense food with the least amount of shit in it in the entire
Yep.
store. And our bill's going to be more than theirs. You know what I mean? Which it kind of
Yep.
sucks, but I'm into
It's
quality.
expensive, right, buddy?
Yeah, you're right. But the quality thing. I'm just using that as example. The quality thing with media as well.
Yep.
Yeah,
Well, but you know what? Part of the problem is there too is what you mentioned earlier with us. With us using these platforms like YouTube, you know, you're like a slave to their algorithms, and so when you look at it and go,
right.
yeah, we're delivering content to a certain kind of audience member, right? That wants the 5 minute or 3 minute video, or that 300 word article that's just clickbaity stuff. Part of that is just playing the game, and the thing that this is another thing that I think a lot of people don't understand about, like, a lot of people putting content up on YouTube is, you know, the whole name of the game is viewable minutes, right? Viewable hours. Like, how many eyeballs are watching your stuff? Because they're going to see more ads and you're going to get paid more. And so the platform itself is designed to make content creators make more content. It's like a
Right.
self-feeding machine.
Oh
And
yeah.
so it doesn't, I think people way overestimate what the average, like YouTube channel generates for revenue. It's not very much. Like, you got to have a big following and you got to put a lot of stuff out there to see real money. And people get into this, and it's like, look at the hunting public guys, right? Like, they started out and they're hunting public land and they have this awesome following, but you got to keep feeding that machine. And so now it's like, we got to film every freaking
Hmm.
thing we can. And I don't blame them for it. Like, that's what people fall into.
Right.
But it's like,
Yeah, they're
it
in it.
almost,
Yeah.
yeah, and it like, it creates its own monsters, right? Because once you start that, like, if that's your job, then you're like, okay, well, I want to make more money at my job. Like,
Yeah.
I want to do better, right? Well, in that platform, you better just film more stuff and get it up there. I know it's not so simple. Like, you need the audience, and you need some loyalty there, and you need your subscribers and all that BS. But, like, really, there, if that's what you want to do now, like, you want to film hunts, you're a slave to that platform and that algorithm. Like,
Yeah.
that's just it. And it's like, it's a rough situation. Like, I don't know where we end up with it. Like, eventually, I would guess, other than the discovery factor, a lot of people will just be housing their content behind a paywall on their own.
Yeah. That's
You
not a
know,
bad move, but you got to get people there, which requires a lot of work and talent, right?
well, yeah, and then you got to go promote it on social media, and then you're the asshole who does that. Like, it's it's just rough,
Yeah.
and a lot of people will be like, "Well, go find a real job or go do something else," and it's like, I always think, like, a this country's badass because you can go out and make a living shooting deer, like, or creating content around that. I love that. Like, I love that we have opportunities to do crazy stuff like that now and make a living. And, like, you don't know, man. Like, I when I got into outdoor writing, we didn't see any of this stuff coming. You know what I mean? I wrote my first article in 2003, and it was like, I was like, when I got hired at Peterson's bow hunting, I'm like, I cannot believe that I got this job and I'm going to get to do this for the rest of my career. And, like, obviously it doesn't shake out that way. Things change, and you're like, okay, well, my job's based around this. So it's like, it's sort of a creep for what it becomes next. You don't just go from being like, I'm strictly a writer, to now I make podcasts. Like, you still keep writing, and then it's like, well, can you film some tips around this? Like, I guess, like, if you want me to do that, and it's like this creep thing, and you end up in a different place than you started, and you're like, well, how many people want to, like, reset their careers?
Yeah.
Like, do you keep kind of going down the same path, even though it's not really the path you started on, or do you start over? And it's just, there's so much more to it than I think a lot of people understand. And so to me, I have a lot of sympathy for people who are like, they're going through life and they're like, man, it is not going exactly as I planned. Like, because that's everything,
Yeah.
like that happens to everybody.
I'm I'm watching it. It's a monster and it demands to be fed, right? It just is hungry and you have to continue to feed it, and at some point, you got to give in if you want to be profitable, or you have to find alternative means and methods. So I've been paying real close attention to it because part of the reason why I learned and fell in love with photography is because Instagram was such an outstanding platform to showcase photography and grow your brand and your community. It was fantastic. And, about the time I got decent at photography, they no longer valued photography. So it was
Yeah.
like, well, that was impeccable timing, but what do they want? They want people spending more time on their platform. So whether that's curating the media, you being on there, or sending it out and getting eyes on it, they want you on there. And it's like, I don't have an hour a day to edit a video and put music over it and
Yep.
for that to be the driver. So and I watch that too, and I'm thinking, yeah, you get comfortable in a position like that where somebody else is in charge of what's happening with your financial ability
Yep.
there in that, and it could be taken away from you immediately. So is that the safest thing to do? And they wave it right in your face too. I didn't monetize my YouTube for years, and they literally send an email saying your ad revenue this month would have been X.
Yep.
And they're like, what? Get on here, like we want to start running some ads on your channel. And they're pressuring you now to, I Sam Sohold, I was talking with him today because he gave in, and he's like, fine, I'll just take my photos and turn them into reels, right?
Yep.
If that's what
Yep.
you guys demand that I'm gonna do, I'll do it, and I'll see how it works. And I talked to him today. I said, how's it going? He said, the only traction I've had with social media since January 1st. He said, I've had nothing, and I started doing this, and that's what they're moving, and that's what they're driving. And I could even tell in what he said, like, something about obviously it's on his mind that he's feeding the monster, and does he want to do that? And
Yep.
right now he's decided that he does, but I know that he's thinking about it just by some of the words that he used and the way that he said it anyways, that there was some hesitancy, like, should I feed this thing, But
Yep.
he's talented. He's a video creator, so it's like, why,
Yeah.
that works for you. But
Yeah.
anyways,
Sam's a badass. I love him. And I mean, he's making a really good point there with what he's doing. And that's another thing to consider, right? Not only what you said, where do it's business 101, man. You don't house your content on somebody else's platform without getting paid for it. Like if you're selling a show to Sportsman's Channel or something that you create, that's different. But when you're like, my whole existence depends on this company based in Silicon Valley, and not to mention I'm a hunter who shoots stuff with weapons, and they could pull the rug out from me tomorrow. And then you have, like you said, you have this platform, Instagram, that was all photography based.
yeah,
Like the whole thing in the beginning was really cool. Like, take awesome photos and show them to people. Like, that's pretty sweet, right?
yeah,
And then China comes along with TikTok, and now Instagram goes, well, we're losing a
everybody,
lot of eyeballs, especially young eyeballs, to this Chinese social media platform that everybody's on. And so they go, we are not going to promote your photos anymore. You're going to have to make videos for us.
right?
And so then you're like, well, if I'm locked into this program and I want to keep going, this is what I have to do. And
Exactly. They
I
became
think
your boss.
I know, and I think I'm getting too old, because I look at this and I'm like, this is so stupid.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
why are we doing this? And
yeah,
like, we're creating hunting content. I'm like, we should have an audience out there that still buys DVDs and magazines. I feel like that,
Yep.
but that's not how it works.
Yeah.
And so you just have to roll with it. And it's like, this is the way to do it now. And it seems crazy, but that's what's going on.
Man, I'm glad that we covered this because it's been bothering me, and it's been bothering me too because I see a lot like we didn't grow up with it, right? So like we know life before the internet and before devices that you're connected to 24/7, and it was really nice. Like I see these young kids that are at the playground and there's four kids sitting around and they're 12-year-old kids, and they're sitting in a circle, they're not talking, they're all on their phones at a playground, and I'm like, you guys are screwed. Like, you know, you're how are you going to get out of that? You're already addicted to that device. And I see when going to sporting events, I see, parents that are, they're just buried in their phones the whole time. And it is such a relief for me when I go up north and I have something better to do, when I don't even think about,
Yeah.
and it's
Well,
such a relief. But when I'm around here and I'm kind of bored or I need something to do, like that's my little binky. You know what I mean? Like,
oh, dude,
oh, come here,
we're all
pacify me.
Yep, we're all guilty of it, and you don't really realize to the extent until you go someplace where you don't have reception, and then it's like, I mean, that's one of the reasons I love going into the mountains, even though there's spots in the mountains now where you get reception, but like it's pretty nice to go for a day where like I can turn it on, it doesn't do me any good.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's a real eye opener, and that's I talked to that woman that we coached with about that this morning because her kids don't have a phone either, and ours don't yet, but they're begging because all their friends do, and they're in
Exactly.
fifth grade, and I'm like, I'm pretty sensitive to addiction, if you reference what we talked about earlier, and I'm like, I just
Yeah.
hate the idea
Yep.
that I'm just like, I'm going to have to get my kids this super addictive thing, and there's no closing that door. Once you
No.
open it, it's open forever.
And the alternative to that, prohibition,
Nope.
has never been a great tool. So it's like, I think we're kind of the first, I don't know, first generation to really have to deal with figuring out how to raise kids with devices and not letting them be enslaved to them. But then also, like, I don't know, you got to teach them how to use it responsibly, and that it's a demon and that it's going to try to control you and you can't let it. But, like, dude, try to tell a young kid that. They're just, I don't know, man. It's going to be a challenge. So obviously, it's something too. And my kid, he's always asking for the phone. If he's bored in any capacity, he's asking for the phone. And
Yep.
if I have to say no, if I had $1 for every time I said no, I could pay my house off. You know what I mean? Like tomorrow. It's
Yep.
it's just it's incredible. So my wife said that Steve and Ranella wrote a book about
Yep.
raising kids in the outdoors, and she just handed it over to me, and she said it was great.
Yeah. It's pretty good.
Good.
It's pretty classic Ronell. I mean, he's a hell of a writer, and he's Steve's an interesting guy, man. When you sit down and talk with him, he's thinking about this stuff a lot. I mean, he's like obviously an incredibly smart dude, but he's like hyper aware
Yeah.
of this, and all the stuff we've talked about here. Like he's hyper aware of creating this enormous hunting media platform or
Yeah.
outdoors media platform, I should say,
Right.
and still at heart being kind of like the guy who just wants to go catch smallies in the river and go trap some beavers and go shoot a deer. Like just it's interesting. But yeah, that book is legit.
I'm gonna read it, and then when I do, I'll make it a point to let people know, and I'll put it in my show notes so that they can find it. Because my wife said it was exceptionally good, and I don't. There's not many things that he does that I don't find interesting. So yeah, that'd be
Yeah,
something that I'll be doing here shortly, I guess.
you did a good job with it.
Well, man, I think that kind of covers it. Let's wrap up on this. What has you excited for your deer season? I know that I'm like really in a mental place right now where I'm like, man, I need some time alone in the woods. So I'm excited. I'm excited for that. I'm excited to get some venison back in the freezer. Like the grocery costs have been asinine, and we've been out of venison since like the end of May. So yeah,
Oh,
yeah, with no supplemental wild game whatsoever. Couple fish, a little bit of turkey, but that's been about it. So that's been rough. I'm really looking forward to getting in the woods and getting some food back in this household. But what are you doing? Where are you going? What's got you excited? What projects are you working on? Hit me with it.
oh man. Well, I'm taking my other daughter out this weekend, and we are going, spike and forky hunting again in Wisconsin. And with this cold front settling in, I think it's going to be a really fun weekend.
Wait a
And
minute.
then,
Wait a minute. I gotta stop you. Just Spike and Forky. Is that the criteria? If a 8 point walks in, we're not shooting it.
well, we're going to shoot a doe with no fawns because we have a doe tag. She has a doe tag and a buck tag,
Okay.
and she really wants, since her sister killed a 2 pointer, she's like, I really want at least a 3 pointer,
Okay.
and that's the
Legit.
bare minimum. But if a spike comes in, he's getting shot. And we always joke, my buddies and I always joke that we're spork hunting up there because like there there aren't that many big bucks, and it's not an easy place to hunt. And so yeah, an 8 pointer comes in, we're gonna be
Okay.
there's
Just
gonna
to
be bolts
clarify,
flying through
because
the
you
air.
said we're going Spike and Forky hunting, so that kind of sounds like what I do oftentimes when I go to
I,
northern Michigan.
I'm just playing the odds here, buddy. I suspect if I have another grip and grin photo out of this weekend, it's going to be with a spike or a forky, but you never know.
Okay. Yeah, you don't.
You know, I've got a few. I had a few, for their really decent bucks, kind of hanging around this one spot, and there's an outside chance that somebody a little bigger could show up. I don't. I have really low hopes of that, but you never know. But
Right.
we're going to hunt deer. Let me put it that way.
Cool.
So we got that going on, and then I'm going to go out and do you know the guys from the Element, Tyler Jones and Casey Smith?
I don't
You ever
know.
dealt with those guys?
I haven't
Um,
I know who they are. I don't know them personally.
they're doing a little bit of stuff with MeatEater this year, and I'm going out to hunt with them in South Dakota. We're going to film a hunt, public land whitetail hunt, the first week of October. I'm pretty excited for that.
I'm sorry.
Just to
Was
have
he a baseball player or something?
nope, nope. Um,
Who is he?
these are
Tyler what?
Tyler Jones.
Because he
Uh,
sounds like a
he's a
baseball player.
he's a musician. They're both really good dudes. They're out of Texas, and they are freaking killers, man. They hunt a lot of public land, and they have been on a tear the last few years where they have been putting down big public land bucks. Like they are good hunters,
Cool.
and we're doing a little bit of stuff with them. And so I'm gonna go film an episode of this series they're putting together, and then I think I'm gonna go to North Dakota and hunt with Mark Kenyon just for fun. We're gonna go hunt some of my whitetail stuff out west, and then Minnesota and Wisconsin. I got to film for uh, the second season of One Week in November. We're gonna film
Cool. I was hoping you were gonna say that.
that whole deal again. I when it, that show is funny because you know how it is when you film a whitetail hunt. When you finish filming a whitetail hunt, you're like, I'm never filming another whitetail hunt again.
Oh,
That sucks.
yeah.
And we all did that last year. After spending 7 full days, basically dark to dark filming it. You're just like, I don't want some guy in the tree with me.
Yeah.
And
Right.
this year, we're I wanted to change things up a little bit, so I'm actually going to start on public land in an area of Minnesota I've never deer hunted before, and I'm gonna just go hunt deer for the first couple of days on in the cattails and just do a different kind of thing than I did last year, and I'm pretty excited for that. I think it's going to be really tough, but I think I have an outside chance of killing a decent buck on public land in a place I've never deer hunted, and that has me that has me excited.
Yeah, that's a challenge with the camera for sure. Like you're stacking the odds against you. The only other thing you could do worse is like maybe come to Michigan. Try to do that.
Well, it's gonna be rough because I'm gonna have a lot of pheasant hunters go through where I am at, and it's gonna be right before the Minnesota gun season, so there's gonna be people out hanging stands, and I think it could be a goat rodeo.
Hmm.
But I also think if I hit it right, and I've been putting some work into scouting it. Like I'm not going in blind.
Right,
I
right.
got a couple areas that I think if I sit all day and I don't kind of lose my mind over having pheasant hunters come in there with me, I think there's a chance, and a big buck there would be like Pope and Young, like that'd be a really good deer. And so, who knows? Maybe I'll get lucky and have a 2.5 year old walk by the first day and I'll be done, or maybe it'll be a disaster. But it's going to be worth trying because I think I think when you do something like that, I could go hunt pretty good spots, which is what I did last year. And we would lay down good footage and probably have a really good chance of killing a decent deer. But I'm like, I don't know. I just feel compelled to like try something different, you know, and maybe I'll crash and burn, but I think it's going to be fun either way. I'm excited to put myself in that situation because I've always wanted to hunt down there and I have never taken the time to do it. And I was like, screw it. This year, that's what I'm going to do.
Cool.
So
Awesome.
I'm going to do that. I do have a backup. I have that farm in Wisconsin I can hunt. I got some stands hung there, and that'll be more of a vacation type of hunt, because that's private land in a good spot. And so the back half of that week, I won't be working nearly as hard. I'm going to have some fun with it. And then after that, it's going to be just pheasants. And I can't wait.
You got any products or clothing articles that maybe something recently that you guys acquired? I mean, you guys have been pulling in brands, and God, it's been impressive. It really, truly has been impressive to see what MeatEater or Nella, what they've done. It's cool. You got anything in that like anything that you're using this year that you're kind of geeked up about, or any pieces of gear, the First Light gear that you really like?
Nothing I can talk about quite yet.
Oh wow, okay, nice.
But I can say that people will start seeing some stuff and all of our brands, so First Light, we've got First Light, and man, some of the stuff that those guys are doing now, it's pretty neat. That camo. I mean, it's expensive, I get it, but it's quality, it's fun. And then we got FHF gear, and those guys are doing something for me that I can't wait to unleash to the world, but I can't talk about it yet.
Okay.
Uh, but it's going to be pretty fun, and they've got some other stuff coming that's badass. And then we got Phelps game calls, and the whitetail world's going to want to pay attention to them pretty soon because I think that they're working on some stuff that's going to be pretty neat, and it's just I don't know. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that's really cool that's going to start making its way out there this year that I'm excited for. So
Nice.
I appreciate the opportunity to sell some products, but I can't do it yet.
Well, alluding to it is a good thing. I mean, that was a great answer. Honestly, I like hearing that. I like innovation in the space, and I like that things are continually. I mean, we are so spoiled with the quality of gear. I mean, you kind of just said it is like so technical, and the climbing gear that I'm using this year is like I just even a couple years ago you don't think the market would accept the price point, but then when you get the gear, you're like, oh my gosh, I couldn't imagine going back. Like this is just
I
such
know
an advancement.
it's crazy, isn't it? And it's like, um, like you said, when I was growing up, I couldn't even imagine like spending like $100 on a jacket. You know what I mean? It was like you go to Wally World or Fleet Farm or whatever, and you're getting whatever, and you're freezing your ass off. And now I feel so freaking spoiled with this stuff. Like the quality of everything. Like I mean, I look at my bino harness. I'm like, there's like more technical expertise in this than you know all of the hunting products I used for like the first 10 years of my bow hunting career. It's crazy.
Right. Yeah, it is crazy. Well, frankly, it's one of the things that has me really excited about this deer season is my bow, my arrows, my broadheads, my tree stand. Like my gear is so dialed because there's so many high quality options, and I've just bought specifically or waited, not been the quantity person, been the quality person, slowly acquired, and I have like everything that I could ever dream of right now going into this deer hunting season, and I'm jacked up. So I was hoping that there was something that would be there that you would mention, and then obviously, yeah, I'm plugging some other clothing companies having you on, so I wanted to return the favor so you guys could go ahead and plug yours.
No, no, I appreciate that, man. You're shooting prime, right?
I am. Yeah, I have for years now. I don't know. I've shot their bow for either 4 or 5 years now.
Are you shooting the inline this year?
I am.
Yeah. It's pretty sweet, huh?
It's pretty sweet. They did a great job with it. They really simplified. It's interesting that you brought that up because Mitch and Casey and I went on a road trip. Literally right when they were excited. Casey wasn't even supposed to tell me, but he couldn't help it. We were in the truck for like 6 hours, and he told me that you guys were going to be, representing Prime, or that you guys had a partnership going, and so I kind of knew that before the general public did, and I thought that was awesome with Renoa being kind of a Michigan guy and them being a
Yep.
Michigan company and all of that. So, but he also told me is there's going to be some big changes to the bow next year. When he said that, my heart just kind of sank, dude, because I'm like, oh no, are they going to do something just to like bring out another bow? Because I'd been so happy with just the bow, and I'm kind of that person that I don't need, like I'm talking, I don't need change all the time, right?
Yep.
But in hindsight, he did a good job of explaining this too. Like, they're an R&D shop. They're
Yep.
not a bow manufacturer first. They are an R&D facility and have been for years. And when you go to that facility, you understand that real quick is like, oh, you have this much square footage allocated to designing and testing. Like,
Yep.
you're literally an engineering company to the definition, and so you
Yeah.
realize that like they have to be innovating because that's what their business is built off of, and they're a young company. So
Yep.
what I'm getting at is when he said that, it made me a little nervous that there's going to be big changes. I was like, oh no, well, here we go. I hope it's not something that I didn't know what to think about it. But when they released this bow and I'm looking at it and I'm going, all right, like I understand why we had parallel cams. That made sense. Is this just a sales pitch and you guys wanted to go away from that because these bows are cheaper to manufacture? Uh, because I'm realizing there's less material. You're doing less time on the machines, or you're just going to one cam. But that wasn't the case. They very much simplified they got to where they were trying to go through a different means, and
Yep.
it's a much simpler on so many levels. It is so much simpler than what they were doing to get to that
Yep.
point, which is to have the bull hold square and be more forgiving than other bows, and quieter, just looks great. Super,
Yep.
much more serviceable and tunable because all
Yep.
those string points they had was getting a little out of control. And I understood what they were trying to do with make the bows adjustable without a press, which is really revolutionary and great. But now they got it dialed. Like,
Yep.
now they got it dialed. So
Yeah.
that's one of the things I'm excited about. Yeah, I have an inline 33-inch bow with the Morel scar, which is like their camo pattern, and
Yep.
I've had broadheads dialed in for, I don't know, over a month, 6 weeks or whatever. I had my broadheads on shooting 2-inch groups at out whatever 20, 30, 40 yards, and I'm like, this bow's just ready to go. Hang this up. I don't need to shoot broadheads into my targets and just destroy them. This thing's ready to go.
Yep.
So yeah, man, I'm pretty jacked up about that, and
Yeah.
I'm
They
assuming
they
you're
do
shooting one.
they do a good job. Those, if you talk to Lou and Nate and Matt and the Grace crew, I don't know, man. Like, they're just different.
Yeah.
They're so different than most people. Like the way they're thinking about stuff, and that I've shot primes, you know, here and there since they came out. And I when I was at Bowhunter, I got to test bows quite a bit and shoot them through the Hooter shooter and all that stuff. And the problem with when you have an engineering team, an engineering family making stuff, is the problems they're solving. They're very hard to explain to the general public.
Right.
Like, it's really hard to take their messaging and turn it into some sexy ad content
You're right.
and get people to understand that. And that's like the biggest hurdle I think they've faced. And it's like, I don't know, man. I've shot so many bows in my life and set them up and tested them, and I've never as consistently. And you keep in mind, I haven't done this with every bow company and every bow model. So like,
Right.
there's good bows out there. Believe me, a lot of people are making good bows, but I never in my life tested one single bow company like them that was as accurate as they were from bow to bow to bow to bow. I mean, it was like there's just the things they put into that bow, the design features and the thought processes behind it. It's solving problems for people they don't even know they have and making it easier to shoot. And they're doing such a good job with that. Like, I wish people could understand that better about them, because it's so hard. They look the same, right? Like, their bow looks like a Matthews or it looks like a Hoyt or whatever. But when you get down to the brass tacks, there's some stuff they're doing that, like, they're doing real well. And I don't know, like, I don't know to what level some of the competition is doing it, but I know to the level they're doing it, and it's impressive.
Yeah, I'm pretty passionate about that company, and I believe in them a lot with them being so local to me, and they've been very kind to me, and we just were on like a similar. We want the same things, right? Like it's just crazy how our morals line up. They're like, we want more hunters in the woods. I'm like, I want more hunters in the woods. Oh, and you make great bows? Sure, awesome. We can be friends.
Yep.
You're 20 minutes from my house. This is fantastic. So yeah, and that's oftentimes for me. You said there's a lot of company making good bows. I think pretty much every company's making good bows, and if you want to compare to what we had 20 years ago, every company is making ridiculously good bows. But the difference is when you go to those factories and you meet the people and you see the process and you see where the materials are coming from. I mean, there's a I don't know if there's a lot, but there's definitely some large bow manufacturers that are building their bows overseas and in China, right? And as like for me, as like I don't know. I'd feel a lot better with what I'm doing right now that my bow is made locally. So I think that's the big one of the big differences, and that's just a personal thing from people to people to people, right? If you like this brand or that brand, I'm just telling you right up front. I like Prime One because they make a nice bow, and two because I like the people.
Yeah, I'm there with you, man. I love those guys, and they're making just solid products.
That's awesome, dude. I've kept you for quite some time now. I'm appreciative of the conversation and apologize for dragging you maybe into some muddy waters or anything of that sort. But I kind of know your personality and knew you'd be down for it. So yeah, man, thank you.
Yeah, buddy, no problem. This was fun.
Where can what you're excited about doing here this fall? People are going to be watching on all the platforms that we criticized for the majority of the podcast, right?
Everything that I create is on, themeateater.com or MeatEater's YouTube channel or Wired to Hunt's YouTube channel. Or I guess if you find MeatEater podcasts out there, I do the Foundations podcast for Wired to Hunt every week. So basically, if you know how to Google MeatEater, you should be able to find the stuff that I make.
Yeah, and I want to say this in closing is that I appreciate the way you do that. I know a lot goes into that. You must write all that out before you record that,
Oh my God, it's 3,000 words of script, buddy, and I do
dude.
52 of them a year. So I've written 2 books for that podcast so far.
I'm amazed that you can do that much at that level of quality. It's great. I enjoy that format. It is good, but I'm sitting there going, "Oh my God, he's got a lot of time into this." I'm thinking,
Well,
but
what's crazy about something like that is, it's a short podcast, right? They're 15 to 20 minutes, but it's all scripted. It's the heavy lift is the writing part of it.
right,
And I told them when I signed up, I said I'm going to give you 2 years, and then my brain's going to be empty. Like, I'm not going to have anything left to say, and I don't want to get into a spot where I'm rehashing stuff over and over again. And they were totally cool with it. And then this year, I've kind of been just going rogue with it because last year was all about week to week. What do you got to do? What do you got to think about? Here's a full year of being a dedicated whitetail hunter. That's out of the way, and now I can talk about some fun stuff and some different concepts and things I'm interested in. And I told my boss the other day, I was like, man, I think I might be able to squeeze an extra year out of this, because the more you do that, the more you realize, like, I mean, just think about blood trailing, for example.
Right.
I mean, I could probably do 15 episodes on blood trailing and all the things you got to think about, and all the things that can go wrong. And so it's like, it's pretty fun because it's challenging, and it just opens my mind to all of this extra stuff that might be of value to somebody out there who's a whitetail guy, or a whitetail hunter that just, like, maybe they haven't heard this or thought about it this way. And it's one of the most challenging things I've ever done, and it's one of the most fun types of content I've ever created.
That's great. Yeah, it's almost there's like an unlimited amount of rabbit holes to go down to, like when you're I don't know, when you really start to pick that content apart and put it under a microscope and you want to go into detail. You can just go off on these tiny little, detail rabbit holes, and yeah, man, it's like almost endless. That's why
Yep.
podcasts have been good for hunting, is because it's a longer format and you can go down those rabbit holes real deep and continue to do week in week out. And you guys do, I think we started off saying you got like 4 of the 5 top spots in the space, and there's a reason for that because you guys do it at the highest level. So thank you. Appreciative of the content and the hard work. I really do enjoy that podcast. So
I appreciate that, man.
yeah, man, I'll tag all these goodies in the show notes this week. People can look you up on social media and hopefully see a nice little spiker or forky on the ground here this weekend. Tony, I wish you guys the best of luck.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me on. This was a blast.